Hare Krishna, devotees. Welcome to day 9 of Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto. So we are in chapter 3 and we are at verse 21. So let us begin. First of all, with our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nera Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripas sindubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Let me just move this slightly. Yes. Okay. So, second canto, chapter 3, verse 21, the upper portion of the body, though covered, though crowned with a silk turban, is only a heavy burden if not bowed down before the personality of Godhead, who can award mukti, freedom. And the hands, though decorated with glittering bangles, are like those of a dead man, if not engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead. Hare. Okay. Right, so here we go. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada begins by talking about the 3 levels of devotees. He says 3 kinds, but 3 levels really. There's Kanishta devotees, they're materialistic, lowest class, but still they're in the category of devotee in a broad sense. Then second class is Madhyam Adhikaris. Madhyam means middle, and Adhikari for that matter, and generally it means qualification. Yeah, so middle level of qualification. And then Uttama Adhikari. Uttama means, well, literally if we analyze a little, Uttama. Tama meaning ignorance, of course. Tamagun, the mode of ignorance. So Uttama means above ignorance, or really speaking, above the material platform of life, transcendental personality. So, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that people, they take to devotional service, and, well, the different levels have their characteristics. The Uttama, first class devotee, doesn't see anyone as being not engaged in the Lord's service. And the second class devotee, Madhyam, middle class, makes distinctions. First class devotee doesn't make distinctions, even between materialists and devotees. But the second class devotee does make distinctions. So therefore, the second class devotee, knowing very clearly the value of Krishna consciousness and seeing by the process of seeing distinctions, the characteristics of different types of people, he sees the materialists are in big trouble spiritually. They're just lost in the material world, and they have just lost their Krishna consciousness, and as a result, they're going through the process of birth and death and struggling and suffering and getting nowhere of any value. So, therefore, he preaches to them. And then the lowest class devotee, Prabhupada says the common person should at least come to the level of being a third-class devotee. Which means, this means a few things, but what's explained here particularly or focused on is coming to the temple regularly and having darshan of the deity. This is something which third-class devotees generally do. And generally, when they do that, they bow down, they may offer some prayers, but if they're really third class, they can't recognize the higher levels. They can't recognize a second-class devotee as being in a better position than them. They're prone to judge by material qualities, qualifications. Like if someone who is a third-class devotee is wealthy, then the other third-class devotees may think he's more advanced than the second class of devotees who are busy preaching and trying to spread Krishna consciousness. So like this, the lowest class of devotees, they're devotees. You can't say they're not devotees, but it's very easy for them to fall down. And for that matter, it's not very easy for them to get up off the third class level and really develop knowledge and get some realization of what is Krishna consciousness, what is not Krishna consciousness, like that. So therefore the common people, Prabhupada says, they should at least become kanishtas, third class or materialistic devotees, and visit the temple and see the deity, because the deity is merciful. So that's good. And if there's sufficient sincerity in their hearts, they'll progress and become second-class devotees. Because generally, every second-class devotee was a third-class devotee. You don't really get people starting on the level of second class, so much at least. So these third-class devotees then, if they're going to the temple, they have the opportunity to hear from the more advanced devotees. And if they do that, if they hear and take it into their hearts, they can make progress. So hearing is the first step of real, more substantial progress. So, but people, in terms of the verse, people who won't bow down to the deity, then it's like their heads or whatever is on their heads, particularly if they have pride. So they have it's like a crown of pride on their heads. Not literally, but it's effectively like that. Big, heavy crown of pride just pulling their heads down. And it'll drown them. Yes. Because a drowning person with a big heavy weight on his head is just going to get dragged down, and that'll be the end. So Prabhupada concludes the paragraph saying, advancement of material science without God consciousness is a heavy load on the head of human society. And so one must take heed of this great warning. And second paragraph. So a common person, even if they don't have time to really get into things, but at least they can sweep the temple. And even someone like King Prataparudra, he did that during the Ratha Yatra. And he really was a big man, and he really had a real crown on his head. So then the idea, Prabhupada says, is that no matter how important you are materially, you have to accept the supremacy of the Lord, and that'll help you. That'll help you even materially, because we read just not long ago at all, some days ago, how even if you want material things, you should do devotional service and it'll help you materially, and of course ultimately to become Krishna conscious. Right, so and because Prataparudra, who's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, because he was like that, humble before the deity, it made him a powerful king, and the Muslims couldn't enter Orissa. And finally he got Lord Chaitanya's mercy. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, so even though a rich man's wife has glittering bangles made of gold on her hands, she must engage herself in rendering service to the Lord. Verse 22. The eyes which do not look at the symbolic representations of the personality of Godhead Vishnu, his forms, name, quality, etc., are like those printed on the plumes of the peacock, and the legs which do not move to the holy places where the Lord is remembered are considered to be like tree trunks. So this is something of a famous verse, actually. I've given class on it many times because, as you can see, the verse itself is referring to deity worship and going to holy places. But first of all, and most particularly, to deity worship. And Prabhupada elaborately in the purport, Prabhupada talks about deity worship, and most particularly deity worship for householders at home. So, without going into, all the details, Prabhupada says the family should have a full program from early morning till late night of worshipping the deities they have at home. And what deities? Well, Prabhupada mentions Radha Krishna, Lakshmi Narayan, Sitaram, or even Nrsimha, Varaha, Gaunitai. Generally, for devotees who are not so experienced, we would recommend Gaunitai or Srila Prabhupada, because the requirements are not so demanding. But if the family's into it, and they're qualified, and if they've got initiation, and particularly if they've got second initiation, then at home they can do very serious deity worship, even of Radha Krishna, Shalagram Shila, Govardhan Shila. So Prabhupada makes an interesting point here, talking about a very serious family. Any member of the family who's above 12 years of age should be initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. And then all the members of the household should be engaged in the daily service of the Lord, beginning from morning 4 a.m. till night 10 p.m. by doing Mangal Arati, Niranjan Archana, Puja, Kirtan, Shringa, Bhoga, Vaikali. Sandhya Arati, Pata means class, giving class. Bhoga at night, Shayan Arati means the Arati when the deities take rest. And like this, under the guidance of the spiritual master, they'll make great advancement. They really will. So such intensive, focused devotion, service to the deity done by serious practitioners who are chanting all their rounds and have received initiation, particularly like that, it's very practical, and they'll make great advancement, more than more than simply by just reading books, although reading books is good and it's important. But being an armchair philosopher in Krishna consciousness is not really so good for you. Knowledge should be there, but the practice should be there, in this case by doing deity worship. So Prabhupada refers to, or quotes, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Gauravastakam, verse 3, Shri Vigrahara Dana Nichanana, Shingaratan Mandira Marjanado, Yuktasya Bhaktam's Chani Unjatopi, Vande Guru Shri Charanaravindam. The spiritual master specifically, among other things, which he does specifically, or which he teaches specifically to the disciples, for the householders who have qualification, who are serious enough, he engages them in serious deity worship like this. And otherwise, Srila Prabhupada talks about visiting temples, going on pilgrimage, these types of things which are very nice. Visiting holy places like Vrindavan and seeing the deities there, that's nice. But the thing is, and Prabhupada always makes this point, that when you go to the holy places, then you should associate with the advanced devotees there. Not just anyone dressed in saffron or, like that, who enthusiastically offers to show you around or something, but genuine devotees who can help you. You should find them at the holy place and hear from them. And under their supervision, visit the temples and have darshan of the deities like that. So, yes. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the best purpose of such traveling tendencies could be fulfilled by visiting the holy places established by great acharyas, and thereby not being misled by the atheistic propaganda of money-making men dressed in saffron who have no knowledge of spiritual matters, because there's just too many of them at those places. There's a huge number. Verse 23, the person who has not at any time received the dust of the feet of the Lord's pure devotee upon his head is certainly a dead body, and the person who has never experienced the aroma of the tulsi leaves from the lotus feet of the Lord is also a dead body, although breathing. Okay, let's have a look here. It's a fairly extensive purport. Prabhupada begins by referring to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who says that the breathing dead body is, what is it? What could it be? It's a ghost. And ghosts have really bad reputations for being malicious and aggressive and just, there's so many stories like that. So then Prabhupada says, similarly, the ghost-like non-devotees who have no respect for the pure devotees, nor for the Vishnu deity in the temples, create a fearful situation for the devotees at all times. The Lord, even sometimes some of those people may try to make an offering, usually in a flashy way, but their offerings are never accepted. So Prabhupada makes the point that there's a famous saying, love me, love my dog. The first thing to do in devotional service is to be the servant of a pure devotee. This is what is meant in the verse by reception of the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee, who has also served another pure devotee. This is the way of parampara. So, second paragraph, and Prabhupada pursues the same line of reasoning by talking about Maharaj Rahugana and the great saint Jad Bharat. And Rahugana eventually surrendered to Jad Bharat, actually, and took instruction from him. And that one of the verses is quoted here from Jad Bharat. Then the third paragraph, Prabhupada makes really, it's a very deep point and it's a very nice point, that in other words, Krishna is the property of the pure devotees, and the only way you can get Krishna is if they give Krishna to you. Otherwise Krishna is not obtainable. Yes, and you'll just be fooling around in material life. So therefore we have to become, as Lord Chaitanya said, Gopi Bharatu Padakamalaya, Dasa Das Anudas, servant of the servant of the servant. And even Anudas, Anu can be translated as following. So servant following the other servants, that's quite appropriate. But Anu also means atom. So in other words, what is being said, it can be taken that become the little servant of the servant like that. In other words, very, very humble. And then only in that way can you really taste the nectar of the tulsi leaves stuck to the Lord's lotus feet. So, Srila Prabhupada then in this purport here, he refers to Brahma Samhita, which says, Prabhupada doesn't quote the Sanskrit, but it's quite famous, Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakto. By studying the Vedas, it's difficult to become a devotee and to progress. But adurlabham, it's not difficult, atma bhakto, if you cultivate devotion of the soul. So therefore Prabhupada says, in Vrindavan, everyone prays to Radharani because, as Prabhupada says, she is the tender-hearted feminine counterpart of the Supreme Whole, resembling the perfectional stage of the worldly feminine nature. And therefore, she's very merciful, to those who try. And once she recommends someone to Krishna, Krishna just accepts that person. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the conclusion is, therefore, that one should be more serious about seeking the mercy of the devotee than that of the Lord directly. And by one's doing so, then by the goodwill of the devotee, the natural attraction for the service of the Lord will be revived. Right. Really nice. So verse 24, and it's another famous verse. Certainly that heart is steel-framed which, in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes and the hairs stand on end. So Prabhupada gives a very extensive purport to this verse. And, of course, we focus on the chanting of the holy names, and what is being said here, you have to just think about it a little to get it clear. What is being said? that what is being said is that you're chanting the holy names with concentration, and ecstasy is taking place, and tears are filling the eyes, and the hairs are standing on end, and maybe some other things too, ecstatic symptoms. But the heart is not changing. This is what's being said. That you're chanting and you're trying to concentrate, but actually your heart is not really changing. So in this extensive purport, it's very important. So Prabhupada gives an analysis, actually, first of all, in the first paragraph, of what has been discussed in the first 3 chapters of this canto. Yes. And just in the most simple terms, what has been discussed is a gradual process of development of devotional service, universal form, super soul, and then pure devotional service, the change of heart. Yes. So these things are being discussed. And now here we are, we're almost right at the end of the 3rd chapter. And emphasis is being given to the change of heart which should happen, which helps a person then to make tangible progress, developing real feeling for the Lord, a real service attitude like that, and relishing nectar. So, in the 2nd paragraph, what's mentioned is that these symptoms that are listed out here, tears filling the eyes, hairs standing on end, they're preliminary symptoms of bhava, which occur before you reach the perfectional stage of prema. So, yes. So, hopefully, so then in the 3rd paragraph, Prabhupada takes a slightly different perspective than the verse seems to. He is saying that if these symptoms don't manifest, then it's due to offenses only. Yeah. The verse itself seems to say there should be another type of change. And the essence of that is the development of the mood of service, actually. Yeah. So, in the beginning, if a devotee is not careful to avoid the 10 offenses, then the change will not really happen. Yes. So, in the 4th paragraph, Prabhupada lists out the 8 transcendental symptoms. What is it? Inertness, perspiration, standing of hairs, failing in the voice, trembling, paleness of the body, tears, and finally trance. Yeah. And there are other developments too, which are more in keeping with what is apparently being said in the verse, that not just that there'll be these emotional symptoms, but there'll be other changes. So in Nectar of Devotion in the 18th chapter, there's a list of deeper changes, not just emotional changes, like what we read about tears, etc. But deeper changes, one of which is, like more or less the first of which, is never wasting time. So a change like this in the devotee's character should be there. Otherwise, if these types of changes like extreme humility, not wasting time, as we mentioned, very, very steady, unbreakable determination, and just like a constant desire to glorify the Lord, these things. If these things are not there, but some emotional symptoms apparently are there, then Prabhupada, in the 5th paragraph, well, Prabhupada says at the beginning of the paragraph, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has very critically discussed all these bhava displays in connection with some unscrupulous neophytes imitating the above symptoms for cheap appreciation. So Prakriti Sahajiyas and other people of that type, they may manifest these symptoms, emotional symptoms, but they don't have the other symptoms, so therefore we take them to not actually be on the level of ecstasy of some sort, not real ecstasy. So anyway, Prabhupada goes on to the 6th paragraph talking about Lord Chaitanya meeting Ramananda Roy, and the Lord was feeling all these emotional symptoms, but he suppressed these symptoms because there were some non-devotee Brahmins with Ramananda Roy. So therefore, Prabhupada says, sometimes the emotional symptoms are visible, sometimes not. In himself, Srila Prabhupada did not often display those symptoms, although sometimes he did. Yes. And Prabhupada lists out these ones that I was mentioning, these more subtle symptoms: cessation of material desires, utilizing every moment in service, eagerness to glorify, attraction for living in the place of the Lord, detachment from material happiness, etc. Yeah. If someone has those symptoms, whether they display the emotional symptoms or not, we can take them to be advanced devotees. Okay, so then the last paragraph, Prabhupada summarizes the whole thing, that advanced devotees who chant offenselessly and they're friendly to all, they can relish the transcendental taste of glorifying the Lord. And among other things, part of the result will be, very important part, cessation of all material desires. So, and neophytes are invariably envious, so sometimes they like to concoct their process, without actually following authorized people. So even if they make a show of constantly chanting, they won't relish the taste. So therefore the show of devotional symptoms like tears is condemned. But even such people, if they contact a pure devotee, they can rectify. Otherwise they'll carry on and just remain stone-hearted, and probably sooner or later give it up, actually. Yeah. I saw yesterday in the program here in Santon, one old devotee. He's been devotee for maybe not 40 years, but good 30 years or more. What would you say? A good 30 years. But he got deviated into, following someone who was not following Prabhupada. And he was just so proud of it. He was so proud of it. But I saw him yesterday and he just looked like a washed out rag doll. So, okay. So Prabhupada concludes the purport a complete progressive march on the return path home back to Godhead will depend on the instructions of the revealed scriptures directed by a realized devotee. And verse 25, O Sutta Goswami, your words are pleasing to our minds. Please therefore explain this to us as it was spoken by the great devotee Shukadev Goswami, who's very expert in transcendental knowledge, and who spoke to Maharaj Parikshit upon being asked. So Prabhupada gives just a one-sentence purport. Knowledge explained by the previous acharyas like Shukadev Goswami, and followed by the next, like Sutta Goswami. So that knowledge is always powerful transcendental knowledge, and it is therefore penetrating and useful to all submissive students. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So now, devotees, we are going on to the 4th chapter of the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And here, it's called the process of creation. And there are 3 sections. First section is from verse 1 to verse 4, where Sutta Goswami, who's speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, he expresses appreciation of Maharaj Parikshit, and that's from verse 1 to verse 4. Sutta appreciates Maharaj Parikshit. Then, second section, Parikshit asks Sukadev further questions. That's from verse 5 to verse 10. Parikshit asks Sukadev further questions. Then, in the third section, Shukadev offers obeisances and prepares to reply. This is verse 11 to verse 25, and that's the end of the chapter. Shukadev offers obeisances and prepares to reply. Okay, so let's make a start. First section, Sutta appreciates Maharaj Parikshit, verse 1 to verse 4. So we'll read the verses, of course. Sutta Goswami said, Maharaj Parikshit, the son of Uttara, after hearing the speeches of Shukadev Goswami, which were all about the truth of the self, applied his concentration faithfully upon Lord Krishna. And verse 2, Maharaj Parikshit, as a result of his wholehearted attraction for Lord Krishna, was able to give up all deep-rooted affection for his personal body, his wife, his children, his palace, his animals like horses and elephants, his treasury house, his friends and relatives, and his undisputed kingdom. It's pretty powerful. And verses 3 and 4 are together. O great sages, the great soul Maharaj Parikshit, constantly wrapped in thought of Lord Krishna, knowing well of his imminent death, renounced all sorts of fruitive activities, namely acts of religion, economic development, and sense gratification, and thus fixed himself firmly in his natural love for Krishna, and asked all these questions exactly as you are asking me. Okay, so let's go back and go through the verses again and the purports. So verse 1, Sutta Goswami said, Maharaj Parikshit, the son of Uttara, after hearing the speeches of Shukadev Goswami, which were all about the truth of the self, applied his concentration faithfully upon Lord Krishna. So Prabhupada begins the purport. There's 2 paragraphs. He begins by referring to the word which is in the last line of the Sanskrit, satim. Satim can mean existing, like sat, sat chit ananda. Sat means eternity or existence. Yeah, so satim can mean existing, but it also means chaste. Yes. So Prabhupada makes the point that both understandings are applicable in the case of Maharaj Parikshit. And Prabhupada goes on to make the point that Prabhupada says, the whole Vedic adventure, it's an interesting way to put it, the whole Vedic adventure is to draw people's attention to the lotus feet of Krishna without any diversion, as discussed in Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Yeah, Vedaischa sarver aham eva vedyo, Vedanta krid veda vid eva chaham, that by all the Vedas I am to be known. Yes. So the whole Vedic adventure, studying all the Vedas, is to know Krishna, and that's basically it. So fortunately, Maharaj Parikshit, of course, he was attracted to the Lord from within the womb. That's special. We, I think, were not. I was not. But he was, and of course he was saved within the womb from the Brahmastra. And since then, even as just an infant, and up through his childhood into his youth, etc., he was focused the whole time from the outset on Krishna. And then he heard from Shukadev, as he's doing now, and his affection for Krishna increased. So these things have already been discussed. So then in the second paragraph, Prabhupada's talking about, first of all, about becoming a pure devotee. In order to become a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, 2 things are essential. And one is having a chance to be born in the family of a devotee, and the other is to have the blessings of a bona fide spiritual master. Parikshit had these. You know, of course, and the point is not really explored here so much, but to take it a step further, even if somehow you haven't had the good fortune of being born in the family of a pure devotee, but at least if you get the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, you can achieve the same thing. But anyway, let's just carry on here. Right, so anyway, Parikshit had both by Krishna's grace. Born in the Pandava family, Shukadev Goswami, a spiritual master, and Prabhupada refers to Chaitanya Charitamrita, a fortunate person by the mercy of the spiritual master and Lord Krishna achieves the path of devotional service. So this is perfectly applicable in the case of Maharaj Parikshit. So through his birth, he automatically contacted Krishna and then remembered him always. And then Krishna gave him the opportunity to go further by arranging for him to meet Shukadev. Yeah. All right, so verse 2, Maharaj Parikshit, as a result of his wholehearted attraction for Lord Krishna, was able to give up all deep-rooted affection for his personal body, his wife, his children, his palace, his animals like horses and elephants, his treasury house, his friends and relatives, and his undisputed kingdom. So Srila Prabhupada goes into the purport. In order to become liberated, in order to become advanced in Krishna consciousness that's most relevant to us, you have to become free from dehatma buddhi, which is the illusory attachment for bodily things and everything related, like Prabhupada lists out. Well, the verse also lists out wife and children, traditional household animals. Now, vehicles have replaced the animals. So the tendency to be attached to your motor car, your bank balance, your relationships with relatives and friends, maintaining social status quo. And these are all part of Dehatma Buddhi. And Krishna consciousness means negating these, becoming free from these, or at least step by step. So by Krishna's grace, Parikshit, even though he had all facilities in the most amazing ways, still he was able to give them up because he was a pure devotee. So that is the point. You know, he was always doing his duties as a service to the Lord, guarding the kingdom, guarding the people, and like that. And the devotee, like Parikshit, he never thinks that all this paraphernalia which we just read, and which the verse also lists out, the devotee never thinks all that paraphernalia is his. He understands it all belongs to Krishna. It's come to me by his grace. And Prabhupada then concludes the paragraph by saying, thereby living entities under a devotee's care get the opportunity for God realization by the management of a devotee master. But now there's a second paragraph, and Prabhupada Prabhupada begins the second paragraph by saying, attachment oops, just a sec, I made a mistake. Attachment for household paraphernalia and for Lord Krishna go poorly together. One attachment is the path of darkness, and the other is the path of light. Where there's light, there's no darkness, and where there's darkness, there's no light. So Maharaj Parikshit, even in his household life, was so expert, he could turn all these things to light by engaging them all in devotional service. And Prabhupada gives other examples. Yudhisthira and the Pandavas, they did that also. Otherwise, one who isn't trained like this has to give up material connections before becoming fit to hear and chant the glories of the words. So in other words, if you hear from someone like Shukadev, just for one day, you may be able to lose all affinity for material things. I mean, that's really amazing, but it's very true. So now we mustn't try to imitate Parikshit by, for example, hearing for professionals, even for some 700 years, what to speak of 7 days. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, to take Srimad Bhagavatam as a means for maintaining family expenditure is the grossest type of namaparad offense at the feet of the Lord. Sarva Shubha Kriya Shamyam Api Pramada. Okay. So, all right. Verses 3 and 4. which are together and are the end of this little section. O great sages, the great soul Maharaj Parikshit, constantly wrapped in thought of Lord Krishna, knowing well of his imminent death, renounced all sorts of fruitive activities, namely acts of religion, economic development, and sense gratification, and thus fixed himself firmly in his natural love for Krishna and asked all these questions exactly as you're asking me. Yeah, so anyway, there's another fairly extensive purport here. So these things, dharma, artha, and kama, religion, economic development, sense gratification, are generally attractive to the conditioned souls, particularly artha and kama, but also in many cases some dharma, some materialistic religion as well, forgetting artha and kama. So the Vedic version is called karma kandya, of course, and it's especially for householders. And Maharaj Parikshit, as a householder, he was sort of involved in these things to some degree, Prabhupada says, but not really. Yeah. And then particularly by the association with Shukadev, he became an advanced devotee. So generally, as Bhagavatam 7:19 says, after many births, the jnanis, one who is situated in knowledge, can reach the stage of devotional service. So Prabhupada makes an interesting sort of analysis that jnanis are 1,000 times better than fruitive workers. But out of hundreds of thousands of such jnanis, one is liberated. Then out of hundreds of thousands of such liberated persons, it's rare to find one who can fix his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna in devotional service. Yeah. As Bhagavad Gita 7:19 says. So Parikshit in this verse is described as Mahamana, on the same level as the Mahatmas mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. So more recently, Prabhupada says, many Mahatmas gave up karma kandya and solely and wholly dependent on Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada quotes five at least, I think 5, of the Shikshastakam verses to illustrate that mood of giving up karma kandya. I won't read through them all. Different verses actually, Shikshastaka verses and other verses too, which talk about that. You can read through them. But then the second paragraph, Prabhupada begins by saying, the whole matter is concluded in Bhagavad Gita 2:41. He says, the whole matter is concluded in Bhagavad Gita 2:41 as vyavasayatmika buddhi, or the absolute path of perfection. And Baladev Vijayabhushan has given his definition of this, clarification, what does this mean? He says, it means accepting transcendental loving service to the Lord as the prime duty, free from fruitive reaction. Yeah. So Prabhupada concludes the whole purport by saying, so Maharaj Parikshit was perfectly right when he firmly accepted the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, renouncing all karmakandiya conceptions of life. Right. So let's go on to the next section, verse 5 to verse 10. So at least we can, I think, read the translations of the verses, and well, let's see how far we get. But at least that we should be able to do. So second section is Parikshit asks Shukadev further questions, because he's already been asking, but now he asks more. Verse 5, Maharaj Parikshit said, O learned Brahman, you know everything because you are without material contamination. Therefore, whatever you have spoken to me appears perfectly right. Your speeches are gradually destroying the darkness of my ignorance, for you are narrating the topics of the Lord. Verse 6, I beg to know from you how the personality of Godhead by his personal energies creates these phenomenal universes as they are, which are inconceivable even to the great demigods. 7, kindly describe how the Supreme Lord, who is all-powerful, engages his different energies and different expansions in maintaining and again winding up the phenomenal world in the sporting spirit of a player. Verse 8, O learned Brahman, the transcendental activities of the Lord are all wonderful, and they appear inconceivable because even great endeavors by many learned scholars have still proved insufficient for understanding them. Amazing. 9, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one. Whether he alone acts with the modes of material nature or simultaneously expands in many forms or expands consecutively to direct the modes of nature. Yeah, whatever form, however he appears, it's him, he's one. And verse 10, kindly clear up all my doubtful inquiries, because you are not only vastly learned in the Vedic literatures and and self-realized in transcendence, but you're also a great devotee of the Lord and are therefore as good as the personality of Godhead. Well, okay.
You can do one verse.
I'll just do one verse. Yeah, so the section begins with verse 5. It's Parikshit asking Sukadev further questions. So let's just go through verse 5. The purport's quite short. Maharaj Parikshit said, O learned Brahman, you know everything because you are without material contamination. Therefore, whatever you've spoken to me appears perfectly right. Your speeches are gradually destroying the darkness of my ignorance, for you are narrating the topics of the Lord. So, Prabhupada says that the practical experience of Maharaj Parikshit is being described here, that the topics of the Lord have acted like injections. Yeah, and they do that when received by the sincere devotee from a proper person. Yes. So it's acting on Maharaj Parikshit like that. Therefore he wants to hear more. Please tell me more. Yes. But Prabhupada makes the point, as he has done, to receive these topics from professionals never acts like this. But for a sincere person hearing from a proper speaker, the experience the sincere person will get will be the quote-unquote gradual disappearance of ignorance. Then famous verse from Shvedashvata Upanishad is quoted, Yasya Devi para bhaktir yata Devi tata guru, tasya te katita hyarta prakashante mahatmana. That one who has full faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and in the spiritual master, to such a person, all the truths of the Vedic literatures are revealed. Yes. And Prabhupada gives the example of when a hungry person is fed, the hungry person feels satiation of hunger, no more hunger, plus feels pleasure simultaneously, and doesn't have to ask, am I properly fed or not? So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the crucial test of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is that one should get positive enlightenment by such an act. Hare Krishna. We will continue on tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.